Hello and welcome to the latest of my deep dive videos. This one into the Libra pink full moon. It's a supermoon on the 16th or 17th of April 2022. Now on the screen now you can see where it is in your locality. Thank you very much for joining me. Now what I'm going to do as ever is explain what the Libran full moon is about. But then I'm going to share the event chart based on Universal Central Time to see what other planetary influences are going to be impacting on the next 2 weeks. But please stay with me. I will then share each of the 12 zodiac sign forecast, and you can watch those from the perspective of your sun or your ascendant. The choice is yours. So this supermoon, when a moon is closer to Earth and it magnifies it from our perspective, is in the sign of Libra. Libran energy is cardinal, so it's a leader. It's very much about relating. It is also about aesthetic, so Librans have a real appreciation of art, presentation, and even fashion. However, the relating angle of this particular full moon obviously sees it in an opposition with the sun in Aries, which is very much what we do as individuals. So if you think about it, the sun in Aries is a bit like the ascendant, and the full moon in Libra is rather like the energy of the descendant. So our relationships are really coming under the astral microscope with this particular event. Are we in a relationship which is more give than get? Or is it a situation where perhaps we need to be more responsive to the needs of others? Maybe some kind of recalibration could be helpful over the next couple of weeks. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're intentionally doing something wrong or being inconsiderate or uncaring. It could be that we're actually spending too much of our time being people pleasers. So whatever needs to be realigned in your or my situation, this full moon is very much about relationships and getting that pivot point between where we're receptive and caring of others, but we don't neglect our own needs is important, or that we're so focused on our own needs that we don't think about other people at all. That obviously isn't a great look either. So it's finding that pivot right in the middle. Now I'm sharing on the screen now the event chart for Universal Central Time, and you can see that we do have an ascendant in Scorpio at 20 degrees. Now the critical thing about this particular event is that the pivot point that I was talking about is actually governed in the southern hemisphere of the chart by Pluto. So Pluto is very near to that pivot point, and Pluto of course is about power. So we have a square between both the sun and the moon position and Pluto. So Pluto squaring moon often creates a lot of issues to do with leverage, emotional leverage around relationships. The sun squaring Pluto is a lot to do with power in relationships. So I think that there are going to be some heavy scenes potentially over the next couple of weeks. It may be in our own personal situation, but it could play out in the wider world just as much. However, Mercury is conjunct Uranus on this event, which is very lively, and that's in the 6th house of practicalities. But they're in a sextile to Venus in Pisces, and of course Venus in Pisces is exalted. So where we can be quick-witted but think of our resources, but the way we relate to people can be skillful, then that's a very enabling mix. Also Jupiter is conjunct the co-ruler of Pisces in the 4th house. So our craving for emotional security after the turbulent weeks that have really gone on for the world in recent times is something that I think really calls out to this event. We also have the North Node in a conjunction with the part of fortune in the 7th house of relating. So we want to see tangible results because it's Taurus, but they're both squaring up to Saturn that's in the sign of Aquarius still in the 3rd house. So I think we need to choose our words carefully, understand the power of our words. And yet Saturn is actually in a very good angle with the moon. It's in a trine and it's in a sextile with the sun. So Saturn's saying, because it's in the 3rd house and in its home zone or home sign of Aquarius, that thoughtful communication can actually be very positive. So if we mean what we say but say what we mean with care, then I think that can be very helpful. Also, we have a Mars in the 3rd house in a semi-sextile with Pluto in the 2nd house. So I think if we can use the energy of Mars, which can be aggressive in a more peaceful, loving way, but find something that works in a practical manner for Pluto in the 2nd house of the foundations of situations, I think that also can be very helpful. So I think the big takeouts from this situation is we could see some surprises around communication with Mercury and Uranus in a conjunction, surprise developments that can please us all. But I think power is at the crucial point of the pivot between the needs of the moon, which is emotion, and the power of the sun, which is assertion. And that pivot point is really what's going to be tested over the next couple of weeks. So any relationship which is leveraged based on unfair control is likely to really be pushed back upon over the next couple of weeks. Now please stay with me for your zodiac sign forecast for each of the 12 signs. So Aries, this event for you obviously occurs in your 7th house. So if you have been very single-minded about what you've been trying to achieve recently, particularly with the support of the new moon which occurred in Los Angeles on the 31st of March, but everywhere else on the 1st of April, it could be that someone is going to push back and say, hey, look, I'm here. I know that you've been trying to do your best and dealing with the challenges you've had, but you need to just be aware that it's not just about what you're trying to achieve. And Chiron was in that new moon, and it did quite rightly ask us all to think about our own needs. But I think Pluto, right at the top of your chart in the 10th house, suggests that maybe your professional or work aims or needs to be the main player in a situation could have been causing some politics. So if you can become more sensitive to how other people are viewing what you're doing over the next couple of weeks and just pivot to their needs in a more intuitive way, I think this can be very helpful to you. Now Taurus, for you this event occurs in your 6th house of everyday practicalities, and the sun's in your 12th house of the more emotional and spiritual domain. If you're somebody who's very much in touch with your everyday reality, but not so much in touch with the feeling side of life, that's the area that you can rebalance, but you can do it by relating to others. So you could find other people that can be sources of information or can advise you on how to deal with getting that balance between your physical and emotional health in tune. What is the role of Pluto? Well, for you it's in the 9th house, and that means that information and becoming more informed can actually be very good for you, but it may require you to receive information in a way which you can feel seems a little bit vulnerable. Try not to see yourself like that. The information you receive could be hugely helpful. Now Gemini, for you the moon is in your 5th house of personal expression, play and affection. The sun is in the collective part of your scope, but Pluto's in your 8th house, and that's very political. So I think whether it's around money, business, group activities, friendships, if you feel controlled or hemmed in, or you feel that there's some kind of politics that means that every time you try to make a move, whether it's in your social situation or in terms of expressing your talents or even pursuing your love life, if someone seems to try to hold you back because of their agenda, Pluto in the 8th house, even if it's unspoken, that could be the issue that you need to speak and work around over the next fortnight. But I think your time management is going to be potentially a little bit pinched, and you could find yourself prioritizing on the skills and talents you have that give you a financial return, because I think that is a little bit of a theme that continues to unfold for you. Now, Cancer, the moon position is in the 4th house, which is very much in keeping with the energy of your sign. The sun is in your sector of success and goals. Have you been putting so much effort into that area that you've not been considering your emotional needs, even if it's an area that you are more of a natural at than some people? The clue could be where Pluto's located, because it may be the complexities of some of your relationships, whether it's professional connections or personal ones. And some kind of relationship isn't quite working as it might do, I feel. And it's just finding the boundary without withdrawing your support or without giving the impression things can only be on your terms. So I think there is definitely some politics in the mix there for you, but I don't think it's necessarily a recent thing. I just think it's going to come back into view. And someone may have realized that despite the fact that you don't necessarily approach situations in an openly hostile way, there is a part of your nature that does favor a degree of control. And it could be that that is something that someone is pushing to challenge you on, and that might actually feel a little bit make you feel a little bit vulnerable, but at the same time try not to retreat and try to receive any comments that are shared with you in a receptive way and work with them. Because if you just pick up your ball and walk off the pitch, in a way it's another form of control, which could just perpetuate the problem between you and the other side. Now that brings us to the glorious sign of Leo. For you, the moon's in your 3rd house of everyday communications. That influences our relationships with neighbours, siblings, technology, domestic appliances. It's quite quick moving, whereas the sun's in the 9th house of expanding your horizons, being much more adventurous, open-minded, perhaps even physically moving. So I think if you are wanting to get out and about over the next fortnight, Pluto's saying it's all about the practicalities have to work. So it could be that you need to make sure the documents and passports and planning that would go into any kind of journeying or learning are all very much in place. If they're not, that could cause some issues. Also, because the sun in the 9th house is pushing you to be more daring, there may be somebody in your everyday world who's resisting your desire to change things up. Particularly with Uranus in your 10th house, it may be around your work that you want to make some alterations, and it could be that someone is a bit fearful of the new way that you're approaching things. Which brings us to Virgo. So for you, the moon is in the 2nd house and the sun in the 8th. It's all about balancing those resources. Now we know that the cost of living crisis, the way fuel costs have gone up, whether it's home heating or transport fuels, it's been quite shocking and frightening. And so everyone's engaged in this process to a degree. But I think for you, it's more about your sense of self-worth. And because Pluto's in your 5th house of self-expression, it's not just about money. It's about the value that you have for what you have to offer. And that may be something that you want to toggle with over the next couple of weeks. There could also be someone that you're really drawn towards in a more sexual, mesmeric way, and the question you need to ask yourself is this person really the right person for you, or are you getting caught up in something that's quite compulsive, which is where Pluto comes in, because it can make us act in that kind of way. Now, Libra for you, obviously the new moon's in your sign. So this new moon is all day long about relationships. And because you can be such a skillful person at relating into other people, it's just that Pluto, Saturn, and before that Jupiter a couple of years ago have really been pushing you to push back where you feel taken for granted. The danger is, have you pushed back too hard? And if that's the case, this new moon gives you an opportunity to just try to rebalance, embrace that side of your nature that's naturally diplomatic, to try to find an accord with the other side. If you're someone who is more naturally obliging of other people's needs, you may still need over the next couple of weeks to stand your ground on something that's very important to you. Scorpio, the full moon for you is in your 12th house, very psychological. The sun in the 6th house of changing the practical structural nature of your life. Pluto in your 3rd house can create a lot of tension. So if there's something that's not going quite to plan, be it emotionally, psychologically, to do with your work, your health, then it can create quite a lot of tension over the next couple of weeks. That tension's not going to go away by ignoring something. You can be very direct and blunt when you're dealing with other people, but very vulnerable really about revealing your own sensitivities and vulnerabilities and even fears. So Pluto in your 3rd house can be about secrets. Is there something you need to fess up about, or is someone going to oppose you over the next couple of weeks, particularly in your professional situation, who up until now has not revealed their hand? So I think it's possible some kind of politics at work can start to manifest themselves, but it is important to, although be mindful of the issue of trust, don't be so absorbed by it that it actually becomes a sort of very living organism of paranoia. So that's the thing you need to ward against. So getting the communication flowing, and if that does mean some difficult strands come up that need to be discussed, then so be it. Now Sagittarius, this moon of course is in your 11th house of friendship, and ironically in the chart for the event, the moon is in the 11th house, very much about friendships, group involvements and future plans. So those things need to feel right. The sun's in a hot position for you because it's very Leonian in the 5th house. So you're wanting to demonstrate to people how talented you are, how fun you are to be around. But Pluto in the 2nd house is saying, but what about the economy, stupid? So in other words, whatever you want to do that is more daring, adventurous, or even speculative, you have to be able to afford it. So if you are doing something that's a bit different, maybe it's with digital currencies or an entrepreneurial idea you've got, that risk taker in you can be turned up to max over the next couple of weeks, but you need to work collectively with others to keep their support, and you need not to be gambling something you can't afford to lose. Which brings us to Capricorn. Now the moon's very high in the sky for you, very difficult to disguise your feelings. Because you're someone who favours stability and long-term perseverance, and the sun's in the 4th house of emotional needs, the foundations of your world is being emphasised by the sun, but the moon's revealing how you actually feel to others, and you may find that very challenging. Pluto in your sign in the 1st house can see you clamping down on how other people may see you, but actually it would, if you do that, be a fearful response. So I think if your feelings do feel that they're on show and other people seem to understand how you're feeling, why resist it? Only because you might in some way be letting the need for a facade or pride get in the way of revealing some vulnerabilities. So I think working on what's important for you around your emotional health, physical and emotional security is what the next 2 weeks is about. And don't let that pride or need to be in control of things stop you growing as a human being. Now, Aquarius for you, obviously the moon's in your sister air sign of Libra, which is house 9, about travel, expansion. The sun's in the bubbly 3rd house, really exciting. And You do have, obviously, Mercury and Uranus very close together in your fourth house. So maybe the communication that's going to go on could be sudden communication within the family, could be linked to a property matter. But I think that there's a sense of excitement because Pluto's in the 12th house. Maybe some stuff's going to come into the open that needs to be revealed, but maybe some sensitive issues could come up that may leave you feeling a little bit on the back foot. But generally speaking, I think that this is an opportunity, this event, to really bravely share who you are, express your identity, even if it does mean sharing some of the parts of your nature which you do feel are maybe a little bit more vulnerable. But with your position of Saturn in your sign squaring with the North Node, I think, you know, perhaps it's a point in the road where you have to be totally authentic, and if people can't hear that from you, it may be time to finally move on, and it could be linked to some family politics. So finally we have Pisces, and for you the Sun's in the 2nd, Moon in the 8th, and Pluto in the 11th. The 11th is about your future plans, but it's also about your idealism. Don't let your pragmatism smash your idealism, but equally you can't be so idealistic that you're not really living in the world as it is. Pisces people can be incredibly idealistic. And I think, especially with your two rulers so closely together on this event, very, very important if you are thinking about investing in something, being more business-minded about certain areas of your situation. Don't be browbeaten by anyone who's trying to share a get-rich-quick scheme with you or enthuse you about this, that and the other, because Pluto is very much to do with leverage, and it's leveraging in a big way your 2nd, 8th house axis. So do proceed with a little bit of care. So it's been a real pleasure being with you. You can see a complex event, Moon in the 11th house of this event, the Sun in the 5th house, where it is very warm and wants to play, but we have to be conscious of the politics of Pluto. However, Saturn is more supportive to the Moon and the Sun, but isn't so good with the North Node. But I think some surprise developments are possible when it comes to communications, particularly between one side that's been over forceful and another side which may have seen a bit more passive. And that will play out in the public domain over the next 2 weeks. Stay safe, take care, and goodbye.